Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Ron Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today we're actually going to be doing something that I think is going to be really special for this channel. Now, it's not lost on any of you that I am a big fan of the Highschool DxD series. And while I currently am waiting and preparing to read through the light novels and compare the differences between that and the anime, I decided why not do the manga first. So that's basically the reason behind today's video. I'm going to be comparing 12 differences between the Highschool DxD manga and anime. Now, based off the anime, I will go as far as the anime does, and I will break this up into 4 seasons. So this will be a 4-part series. The reason why I'm doing 12 differences is because there are 12 episodes in each season of Highschool DxD. So I figured what would be more appropriate than picking out the 12 big differences. Now granted, there are a lot more than just the 12 that I'm mentioning, but I am going to just be doing 12 for now. And if you want, you can read the manga for yourself online for free and do some of your own comparisons. And if you've already read ahead, then let me know down in the comments section some differences that you spotted between the anime and manga. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's video. Season 1 in manga form starts at chapter 1 and ends at chapter 22. One of the main key differences that I see, and this will be our number 12, is going to be the looks. Not that the looks change all that much for many characters, but there are a few that really stood out to me. First, there's Rainier. As opposed to the anime where she switches from her sundress that she wears with Ise on their date, her skirt and pink shirt combo, before changing into her dominatrix sort of look, that look is actually not in the manga at all. Instead, she wears the same outfit that she wore on her date with Ise for her duration in the manga, and that was something that truly stood out to me, mainly because I watched the anime first and getting Rainier's type of character, which is still consistent with what the anime portrayed. You would think that that look would have been in the manga, especially with what DxD is known for, but surprisingly it's not. Also, there's Kiba's look for when they have the rating game against Riser Phoenix. That being not a big change, but the fact that he wears wrist guards when he goes into combat is something that I wasn't expecting, mainly because I just never thought Kiba would wear wrist guards. Also for Akano, in the rating game as well, she doesn't wear her Shrine Maiden outfit. She actually only wears that when they're training and preparing for the rating game, but she wears her standard high school uniform for the rating game itself, and I thought that that was another key difference. When it comes to Asya, her difference isn't so much in her looks, but rather it's in her name and how it's spelled. In the manga, it's actually spelled Aashia, and it's pronounced as Ashia, whereas in the anime, it's pronounced as Asya, and it's spelled Asia. Now, that truly blew me away, mainly because I didn't think that the spelling of the name would be that different. Now, you can see why they're similar, and I do wonder what could have been lost in translation that would cause for the A, S, and H to be removed and for it to be switched with just Asya. Although some people pronounce it as Asia, that's just another name change that I wasn't expecting. But then finally, the biggest one for me was Ise's boosted gear design. Now we all know that in Highschool DxD, when Ise first uses his boosted gear, he has this weird semi-gauntlet form that doesn't completely cover his arm, but mainly just the palm of his hand, and his fingers are still exposed. That form does not exist in the manga. Instead, in the anime, it's that look, but in the manga, it's actually just his standard boosted gear. The one that he basically unlocks when he fights against Rainier. Which, if you ask me, is the biggest difference, mainly because it makes me question why they went with that choice in the first place, why they would use a partially formed boosted gear as opposed to just a regular one, seeing as how when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, there really wouldn't have been a difference or a need to change it in the first place. Mainly because that first form of Ise's boosted gear, when he has it, it really doesn't act or function any differently from the boosted gear that he uses in the manga. So that's the first note of differences that I noticed differentiating between the two. Number 11, Ise's power and potential. Now, this is something that would be a bit harder to explain, but I'm going to try my best here. When it comes to anime and manga, seeing something can have you perceive it in a particular way. I'm going to use the example from Dragon Ball Z to get my point across. In the Dragon Ball Z manga version of the history of Trunks' story, Android 17 is the one that kills future Gohan in their battle. 18 doesn't get involved, and it really shows just how powerful the androids are that even Super Saiyan future Gohan can't take the two of them, and he can't hold his own against one. However, when you compare it to the anime version, the same future Gohan is seen swapping hands with both 18 and 17, and it was both 18 and 17 that end up killing him. The reason for that is because in terms of power, you then get this idea of the manga and the anime version of a character that can be different. You would see that in this particular situation, future Gohan in the manga is weaker than the future Gohan that you see in the anime. And I would say that for Ise, this is something that I definitely notice. It's not that Ise is necessarily all that strong, but it's mainly just the fact that when it comes to Ise and how he performs against certain villains, and in certain fights in general, in the manga, he seems way more competent and is holding his own a lot better than he does in the anime. The anime goes out of its way to make Ise look a lot weaker than he does in the manga. Now, this isn't too big of a difference. It's not like Ise in the manga is just running through people, far from it. But at least in the manga, it gives off the sense that Ise is just a lot more competent in how he fights and how he carries and handles himself. So that's just another difference to keep in mind between the two. Number 10, A Tale of Two Phoenixes? Riser Phoenix seems a lot different in the manga compared to his anime counterpart, and I would say it's overall in the tone of the character. First and foremost, Riser in the manga is actually a lot more of a pervert than he is in the anime. While the anime kind of goes out of its way to not make Riser look as though he acts like Ise, in the manga he pretty much does act exactly like Ise in every way, shape, and form. And he in fact wants to have the ultimate harem for himself. That's the reason why his house looks and is the way that it is. He actually handpicked them all by choice, and he goes into great detail about how he did it. Also, there's his sister Ravel Phoenix, and she's different in the manga compared to the anime as well. And that's in the sense that Ravel doesn't come off as a big of a jerk compared to her manga self or anime self in season 1. Like in season 1, she is talking a lot of crap about the House of Grimmery, whereas in the manga, she is a lot more laid back. She does do some trash talk, but it's not to the same degree. Like, she's not overly confident. And for the most part, she actually doesn't care very much for her brother and his antics. One key note though about Riser and the differences between the anime and the manga is his interactions with Ise. In the manga, he comes off as more of unimpressed than acting like a complete and total arrogant brat with Ise. In the anime, he comes off as though he's this rich, entitled, snobby, elitist, sort of like devil jerk. But in the manga, he's not like that necessarily. Like when Ise tries to stand up and challenge him, he doesn't get bent out of shape and angry that Ise is challenging him. He actually just gets more annoyed because he knows that Ise isn't powerful enough to do anything, and he doesn't understand why Ise is still trying. He actually makes a comment in the manga stating that he does recognize the power of the boosted gear in the Welsh Dragon, and he knows for a fact that in the hands of someone who was more capable, that power could really be dangerous. But the reason why he doesn't see him a threat in the manga is because he knows that that's nothing but potential. And up until this point, Ise, just because he has the potential, he doesn't have the power to back up that potential. And I feel like that's a big character difference that I kind of wish they would have had in the anime. Not to say that the Riser in the anime was bad, it's just that in the anime, he comes off as more of a typical generic villain more than anything else. Whereas in the manga, not that there's some deep or big character difference between the two, but I would just say in the way that he handles and presents himself, he's just way more of a jerk in the anime, and you can see that definitely in the anime they cranked up his unlikability from, say, maybe a 7 all the way to a 12. Like, it's night and day between the two of them. So that's just something else to keep in mind. Number 9, Rhys Grimmery. Rhys in the manga is much more of a hard ass on Ise than she is in the anime, and it's honestly not even close. I would say in terms of the manga, she's someone who is not so easily swayed as to put up with Ise's nonsense as much as she is in the anime, and I feel like you know what I'm talking about in the sense that when it comes to the anime version of Rhys Grimmery, she comes off as the type of person that just seemingly lets Ise do whatever he wants. Like, she's almost always in like a happy mood. I mean, occasionally she can be serious and be pissed and be mad, but overall she's always seeming happy. But here, she can be more irritated with Ise, and that's something I didn't expect. Also, she slaps him a lot more, not like it's a lot or anything, but like whenever Ise is like talking back at one of her orders or something, like she does not hesitate to put Ise in his place and remind him how things work. And I think that is a major difference between her in the anime and the manga. Also, there's the fact that she doesn't take the damsel in distress kind of role. And honestly, that's just a way more than I was ever expecting from Rhys. Like, in the anime and the manga, while she does talk about the House of Grimmery like a family, in the manga, she refers to Ise as property. And I know that something like that might not be too big of a deal, but it actually is because she never refers to Ise as property in the anime. And I think that's a big difference. Like, in the anime, she truly treats everyone like their family, and I don't think that anime Rhys Grimmery would ever refer to anyone as her property. Whereas in the manga, she flat out calls Ise her property. And there's another key moment that I want to bring up real quick. And this is a moment that happens when Ise attempts to attack Riser when Riser and Rhys are having their showdown about Rhys rejecting marriage to Riser Phoenix. Which also, by the way, Riser, again, does not act like as big of a jerk when that situation takes place. He's merely just going along with what's happening, and he wants to do it. But like in the anime, he's like way more, you know, just sleazy about it. Whereas in the manga, that just doesn't come out as much as it does in the anime. But back to my main point. Basically, when Ise goes to attack Riser, Riser sends one of his own pawns out, and his pawn basically like hits Ise and knocks him to the ground. It was at that moment that Rhys accepted the challenge for the rating game. In the manga, when Ise gets hit, she does not bat an eye at all. In fact, that's where she brings up, "Don't damage my property." And it's actually Asya that goes to help him back up. And Rhys basically stands up for herself and accepts the rating game, but not because Ise was hurt, but she does it on her own terms. And that's just something that is much different than the Rhys that I knew in the anime, mainly because it's not that Rhys doesn't care, but it's just in the sense that Rhys comes off way more assertive than she does in the anime. At least in the sense that Rhys is a lot more chilled, a lot more laid back, and she still is in the manga. It's just that when she needs to bring down the hammer, she definitely does, and while she likes Ise and she likes to spend time with Ise, it's very clear difference between anime and manga that Rhys does not hold Ise as her end-all be-all, and like she doesn't come off as dropping everything that she's doing for Ise. Like when there's time for fun, there's time for fun, but when it's time to get serious, she can definitely get serious, and that's just something that I truly found interesting about her character. Number 8, the power system. This one isn't going to be all too long, but if you've watched the Highschool DxD anime up till season 4, then I believe you're familiar with the rating game match between Rhys and Cyberorg. During that match, they used the dice system, and it was in the dice system that they announced the overall points in total for each piece in a household. I just wanted to bring that up briefly here because they actually explain that for the reason behind the piece numbers in the manga a lot sooner than they do in the anime. Instead of it being used as a part of the dice game, it's actually used to explain the power system behind each evil piece. And I just thought that that was a bit intriguing, mainly because I kind of wonder if that's where they came up with the idea for the dice game later on with the rating game between Cyberorg, or if that was just something that was used up until now. Again, it might even be in the light novels, but I haven't read the light novels yet to be for sure. But I just thought it was interesting that they brought that concept in a lot sooner than they did in the anime, waiting until season 4 when they could have used it at season 1. Although for season 1 to explain the power system the way that they did, it was more than enough. I just thought it was a nice little footnote and Easter egg to get into. Number 7, Ise's training. I would say this is one other small difference between the anime and the manga, but it's a small difference that I feel makes the biggest of changes in terms of experience. And that's Ise's training. It's just mainly in the fact that up until the point of the rating game against Riser Phoenix, when Ise was training in the anime, even though he was giving it his all and he does learn the ability for dress break and things of that nature, in the anime it's not as intense as it is in the manga. In the manga, he is beaten, battered, bruised, he has sores everywhere, and it really does look like he has been grinding and preparing for the rating game. Whereas in the anime, while he puts in some training and effort, it really doesn't look like he tried as hard as he did in the manga. In the manga, he is working himself to the bone. He is jogging with boulders on his back, with Rhys sitting on top of the boulder and doing push-ups with the boulder on his back. His training with Kiba is a lot more intense, and they are just sparring, going at it heavily. He takes his magic training with Akeno more serious, and even with Konko, he looks like he's holding his own a lot better. Again, another keynote with your perception of the anime and the manga. It's just that overall, it looks like Ise improves a lot better in the manga than he does in the anime. Number 6, the violence. This is something else that I really felt was a bit tricky when I was thinking of the top 12. And that was mainly because when you compare the violence between the anime and the manga, it really is kind of night and day, but also it's not. Now, normally this is something to be expected with censorship in Japan and all around the world and everything else. Usually things that happen even in the most gruesome of mangas are usually toned down somewhat so that it's more acceptable. But still though, when you think of Highschool DxD, you think of a lot of the violence that does happen in that show, a lot of the blood and the gore that you do see, and I'm surprised just how more in deep of it that we actually get in the manga compared to the anime. And the one example that I'll use is the moment when Ise is going to fulfill a late night pact, and he goes to the house of the person that summoned him, and he finds Freed there, and this is the introduction of Freed, where Freed kills the person that summoned Ise for summoning a devil and things of that nature. Now, here's the thing. In the anime, it's implied that what Freed did to the body was so gruesome that they can't even show it. All they show is a puddle of blood. Whereas with the manga, not only does it show Freed basically singing around and dancing like he does in the anime, but they actually amplify it even more in the manga. Like, he breaks out into a full-blown song about what he did, and he's just, I kind of had to laugh at that point. But what he did to the body was just absolutely insane. And not to go into too much detail with what he did, I mean, you can see it for yourself, but I mean, they actually showed what he did to the body, and he had, let's just say he had it nailed to the wall, and when you look at it, you can hardly even tell that it's even a body even more. Like, Freed basically destroyed this guy in the worst way possible. So all in all, the violence just in general, like just between fights in general, like when certain characters are like hit, like when Riser is hit in the face, whereas in the anime where it appears as though, like, you know, some fire appears and he like quickly regenerates, in the manga his body is disintegrated in a few places a few times. Now granted, he has the ability to regenerate, so that's fine though, but still the portrayal is very different. So I would say the level of violence between the two are definitely night and day, to say the least. Definitely a lot more graphic in the manga. Number 5. Konko the Pervert. Okay, now this was something that I had to reread over and over again to make sure that I wasn't like misunderstanding anything, but Konko makes a lot more vulgar remarks and jokes in the manga than she does in the anime. Now, in the anime, not so much in season 1, more so in like seasons 2, 3, and 4, like, she has a foul mouth. Well, not so much a foul mouth, but it's like she makes a lot of like innuendo kind of jokes towards Ise and like what he does. And like the slapstick isn't as prevalent in the manga as it is in the anime. Although honestly, with slapstick in general, it usually is more prevalent in most animes compared to their manga counterparts. But for the most part, Konko doesn't even hit Ise all that much. And even when she does, she actually goes and helps him back up and tries to take care of him. Like, one moment in particular is when Ise is going to go and save Asya from the fallen angels and go to the church and everything else. When he's preparing to leave, Konko is not only willing to go, but she actually remarks that she doesn't want to see any of her friends get hurt. Basically, including Ise right from the get-go. She says, I don't want to see anyone from our household get hurt, and I want to help. And I just thought that that was really different, because in the anime, she basically says she'll go because she didn't have anything else to do, basically implying that she could have cared less if she had gone or not. But when she finds out that Ise and Kiba are going to go, she's already on board, she's already ready to go, she's ready to help. So I wouldn't say that she doesn't have a personality, but I would just say that it kind of comes to life a little more in the manga than it does in the anime. As compared to in the anime, where she has a bit of a like monotone sort of like characteristics, in the anime she is, you know, a bit more, I would say a bit more tsundere, a bit more plain and generic in nature, although her personality comes out a lot more as the seasons progress. Basically, season 3 Konko is what you get in the manga in the beginning, and I just think it's all the more better for it. Like, she actually flirts with Ise a little bit from time to time, and it even gets to a point where Ise has to like cut her off at the sentence whenever she's about to do something. So I just found that to be way more enjoyable to me, and another key difference between the two series. Number 4, Asya the Pervert. Now, this was something I was not expecting, but the more I think about it now as I read and progress more in the manga, the more that it actually makes sense looking at how things played out when you compare the two. And that's mainly that Asuya is way more perverted than she is in the anime. Not like to Ise or any extent like that. Like, she doesn't, go around acting all, like, seductively like how Rhys or Akino is. But do not be fooled. Asuya knows very well what things are. In the anime, she's kind of played as the dumb blonde stereotype, essentially. Like, she doesn't fully understand social cues and everything else that's going on around her. Whereas in the manga, she is basically fully aware of Ise, of what he is, what he's all about. And not only is she fully aware, she's actually down for it. In fact, Ise even calls out that he can't tell if this is how she really is, or if she's just playing the role of the good girl, like nun type of character. And it's basically implied that Asuya, even though she'll bring up things like how, sex before marriage is immoral and all these other things and things of that nature, it's like there are certain characters who can like call her out on it and will be like, no, Asuya, you know fully well what you're doing. You just use it because you don't want anyone else getting close to Ise. And it's actually a funny moment in the classroom where Kiryu is actually about to say something, but Asuya stops her because Asuya is fully aware of what Kiryu is about to say and she doesn't want it revealed. And the reason why that is such a big difference is because in this type of situation in the anime, Kiryu would have just said what she said and Asuya would have literally have been too stupid or like too naive to understand. Asuya is not as naive in the manga as she is in the anime. Like, she is fully aware of what's going on and what she is doing most of the time, and that's one key difference that really stood out to me with this series. Number 3, Rhys' parents and the Phoenix ceremony. Now, this was something that I had to stop and think about for a moment when I read it, because it sounded like something that happened, but it didn't happen. Basically, to explain what's happening, if you remember the ceremony that happens after the rating game between Rhys and Rhys, there's the ceremony that's held in the underworld where Rhys wants to show off and announce the official engagement between he and Rhys, and he shows her off in her wedding gown and everyone is there. Now, here's the thing about this moment. In the manga, Rhys' parents, mother and father, along with Sir Zex, are all there. However, in the anime, in season 1, her parents are not at the ceremony at all. They're not mentioned, they're not spoken of. Maybe they appear in the background, but I don't see them. So essentially, they're not there. Now, this is where the retcon comes in. Because if you go all the way to season 3, when Rhys and Ise and everyone else in the House of Grimmery goes for summer vacation to the Grimmery domain and they meet with Rhys' mother, she basically brings up a situation that happened in the manga at the ceremony that did not happen in the anime. And to bring up that moment, that what happened right here, and I'll touch on it more in the next part, and that's that Ise says when he's asked what he's fighting for, basically instead of saying that he's fighting for Rhys to decide who she can and can't marry, Ise flat out says, I am fighting for her virginity because if anyone's going to take it, it's going to be me. Now, here's the thing. In season 3, when Ise recalls that situation, instead of saying that he was fighting for Rhys Grimmery's right to choose who she wants to marry, he actually confirms that he said, oh, I want to take your daughter's virginity. Probably not the best way to introduce myself to her parents. And Rhys basically confirms that that's what he said. Now here's the thing. Ise said that in the manga. Ise did not say that in the anime. And the retcon is that anime Ise acknowledges what manga Ise said back in season 1. So basically that's kind of the bit of the retcon here in this situation. Like, you have to stop and think about it for a moment, because when you rewatch season 1, Ise did not declare he wanted Rhys's virginity. He did that in the manga. However, in season 3 of the anime, they address what happened in the manga, and basically because in the manga Rhys's parents were actually at the ceremony, they watched the fight between Ise and Riser Phoenix, even though in the anime they are not there. So that's a bit of a retcon with Rhys's parents. They actually both make an appearance in the season 1 version of the manga, unlike in the anime where Rhys's mother doesn't make a first appearance until season 3, and Rhys's father doesn't make a first appearance until the second half of season 2. So that's another difference to look at as a whole. Number 2, Echi more, Echi less. Now this was something that, again, you know Highschool DxD, you know what it's all about. What truly shocked me is the real amount of ecchi that you get in the manga compared to the anime. Now, just like with the whole violence thing, how the violence is often more cranked up in the manga, and even for the most lenient of animes, it's usually cranked down somewhat. In the manga version of Highschool DxD, one thing that does not happen commonly, that usually happens with the girls in the anime, is that usually the girls in the anime, when they fight, when they take damage, their clothes rip almost instantly like paper, and like basically like their breasts and everything else, they're like naturally just exposed. Like their clothes are basically like paper in the anime, and like are almost rippable by basically anything. Whereas in the manga, even when they take damage and they get some cuts in their clothes are not completely blown off like how they are in the anime, unless Ise uses dress break, of course. But still though, it's kind of like a big difference, and that's one thing you take note of when you watch, say, the fight with Konco and with Freed Selzen. That's in that fight when Konko, you know, takes some damage from Freed's attack. Like her clothes, like some of her like shirt is basically like ripped off instantly and basically exposes her breast. But in the manga, her shirt is ripped only a little bit and you can barely see anything. So that's something that was truly shocking to me. But the thing though is that when they are ecchi in the manga, like they are full blown. I would say Ise is more of a pervert in the manga than he is even in the anime. If you think anime Ise is a pervert, you have not seen anything until you have seen manga Ise. And if I have to bring up one moment, it's going to be this one. If you remember when Rhys was trying to lose her virginity because she wanted to be impure so that she couldn't marry Riser, and she goes to Ise's house to basically do the deed with Ise. In the anime, Ise is more respectful and he does not take advantage of the situation, and he actually talks her out of it. In the manga, he does not do that. In the manga, he is actually ready to go and preparing to get it done. Like in the anime, it's basically flipped on its head in the sense that in the anime, Ise is kind of all talk, but when it's like time to get down, he's like usually shy and backs away, like he never goes through. In the manga, he is more than ready to go through. He is more than ready to get down whenever the situation calls for it. And in that situation, he was getting ready to get down with Rhys, but the only thing that stops him is that Graphia arrives right when like they're about to get started. Whereas in the anime, Ise talks Rhys out of doing it, and he actually helps her put her clothes back on and things like that. And then Graphia arrives to take Rhys to go talk about the meeting with Riser and all that good stuff. So that's a big difference. You know, it's not as ecchi as the anime, but when it is, it definitely is, if you know what I mean. And finally, number 1, things are out of order. Now, to basically explain this, I will have to go a little bit into season 2, Now, this will also be on the season 2 countdown, but basically, there are certain parts that did and didn't happen, or rather, the anime took liberty with what was shown first and what wasn't shown first. And that's first and foremost the only thing I'm going to talk about here is that Sona and the House of Sea, they don't make an appearance until after the fight with Riser and basically into the events of season 2. Essentially put, Sona and House of Sea never make an appearance in the manga during the first 22 chapters, basically everything that covers season 1. Now again, I haven't read the light novels, but if I had to make my educated guess, I'm going to assume that in the light novels they were there, but in the manga they just weren't, or whatever they did do, they did off screen. But honestly, that can't even be the case, because for the story in and of itself and the way things are structured, Ise and Saji, they don't have their first actual interaction until after the events of season 1 through the continuity of the manga going into the continuity of season 2. So basically, Ise doesn't even meet the House of Sea until the events of season 2 take place, which is honestly one of the biggest differences that I wasn't expecting. It really kind of shocked me when I finished the first 22 chapters that covered all of season 1, and I had to go back and I realized in that moment, oh snap, Sona's not in the beginning part. And it kind of makes you wonder why they chose to do that the way that they did. I mean, granted, it's cool that we got to see, some of the House of Sea, but honestly, outside of Sona, Tsubaki, and Saji, you really don't know much of anything about anyone else. Now again, that could just be the light novels, but that's just the number one for me. That Sona, Tsubaki, and Saji, they don't make their appearance in the season 1 portion of the manga. They actually arrive in season 2. But that concludes the list for the top 12 differences between the anime and the manga for Highschool DxD Season 1. All in all, my overall thoughts and opinions on the differences, based off of everything that I've read and seen so far, I'm going to make the assumption that when you compare the 3 different forms of the story, that being the anime, the manga, and the light novel, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the manga is the story in its purest form, basically the rough draft, if you will, of everything that happened. The light novels, I will have to assume, probably have the most detail about everything, seeing as how it is, again, a light novel. I imagine that there are a lot of things that happen in the season 1 portion in the light novel that don't get covered in the manga, and especially don't get covered in the anime. And as far as the anime is concerned, I think they definitely just restructured some things. All in all, the anime, I would say, is a faithful adaptation of the manga in every sense of the word. But when you compare the two, you can definitely see where the anime takes liberations in adding different things, and you can also see where they take certain things away, like certain character dynamics and things of that nature. Like again, when you look at Rhys's personality in the anime compared to the manga, it's definitely a tale of 2 different Rhyses. When you look at how Konko and Asya behave, they're a bit different as well. I would say Akano remains about the same pretty much. I don't think Akano changed all that much. Although, like I've said before, when it comes to anime, usually the character traits are dialed up a bit more to be a lot more dramatic for the, live adaptation of the story as opposed to the manga. But, all in all, she's pretty much the same. Kiba basically remains the same. The one surprising changes for me were with Riser and with Ravel Phoenix. That being because in the anime, when I first watched it and I saw Riser for the first time, they did a good job of making you hate the guy. Like, I did not like him at all. Whereas in the manga, I can't say I hate him. Not that I like him, but I can't say that I hate him. Honestly, manga Riser is a lot more tolerable than anime Riser, especially in season 1. Like the anime version of Rise of Phoenix, they basically made him like as big of a villain as they could for Ise to beat. But honestly, in the manga, for as being a jerk as he is, and he's still jerky in the manga as well as in the anime. Whereas in the manga, though, he actually makes sense with how he acts and how he behaves, in the sense that he is self-aware and a lot more understanding of what he's doing and around him. Also, he's more of a pervert in the manga than in the anime. In the anime, he's more suave. He seems a lot more older, a lot more mature, and things of that nature. Whereas in the manga, he's basically no different than Ise in every way, shape, and form. He just happens to be a bit stronger in the beginning. But really, that's some of the key differences between the two. All in all, this video was really fun, really enjoyable to make. I'm having a blast reading the manga at the time. I'm getting ready to cover the season 2 portion, and it feels like I'm doing the story, like I'm getting back into it all over again. I can't wait to see more of what's the difference between the anime and the manga. Like, I'm really looking forward to it because it's just a fun thing to see. You get to see the characters in a different sort of way, a different sort of light, and you get this whole new interpretation of them as opposed to what you thought you knew. Would I recommend to read the manga? Absolutely, if you haven't already. If you had to pick between reading or watching first, I would say give it a read. It was only 22 chapters that basically covered all of season 1. So, honestly, you could read the season 1 story in like half an hour, not speed reading, just take your time, read, and digest everything. You can honestly finish it in like half an hour, maybe even 20 minutes tops. And then you can go and watch season 1 and do your own comparisons if you want. But these were just my key observations, and I hope you enjoyed the video as a whole. And if you want more videos like these, then let me know down in the comment section below what you think. If you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.